Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Welcome to all of our members, subscribers, and viewers from all across the world. In this live stream, I wanted to talk to you about the latest developments coming from Gaza, with more talks from U.S. officials about the prospect of having a ceasefire within the next few weeks. There's been a lot of positive talk in recent days about a ceasefire. However, we haven't seen anything official being made public yet. However, the fact that there have been many delegations, both from the Palestinian side and the Israeli side, going to Cairo, talks about proposals to do with names and lists of people. These things indicate that we might be looking at something soon. However, no confirmation is happening yet. Alongside the Israeli massacres that happened just in the recent hours in a Nusayrat refugee camp and the disasters in the north. And I also wanted to talk to you about the latest developments when it comes to Syria on the ground. There has been a lot of progress when it comes to the new Syrian interim government, alongside visits from top figures from Turkey to Syria, and the recent statements that came from Iran in relation to the resistance fronts and the statements of the supreme leader of Iran, Sayyid Ali Khamenei. I'm going to start off with Gaza. And for those of you, of course, who are new to my channel, by the way, for any live streams, we usually open the space up after I speak about the topics. And then you can also ask any questions and participate too. And I'm going to start off with Gaza. Gaza, so far, Israel almost expelled everyone from the north. Gaza has been declared as a disaster zone several weeks back in the north, with this barbaric Israeli Zionist campaign of the general's plan, they call it, to ethnically cleanse everyone from the north. They have been destroying hospitals, refugee camps, and today they forcibly expelled people from the last refugee place. The people were seeking shelter in a school. Some of them were getting lost. They were imprisoning many of them. And the total numbers of the Israeli actions in their genocide in North Gaza in the past 51 days, ever since they started to implement this general's plan that they call, is 3,700 people have been killed or are missing. 3,700 in 51 days, 10,000 wounded, and 1,750 people kidnapped by Israel. That's from the north only in the past 51 days. In the total, we're talking about 45,000. This is the official number, apart from the 10,000 missing and over 120,000 people wounded. And despite that, they're continuing their massacres. Today, they targeted a Nusayrat refugee camp, killing over 25 people, with dozens of people wounded, including women and children. They're doing this as if it's a norm. People are using any sort of events to, ignore what's happening. That's not something that should be ignored. The Israeli genocide in Gaza is the worst and most pressing topic, and it must be stopped immediately. And when it comes to the countries who are participating in this, although there are talks about positivity, but not enough action is being taken to stop what's happening. With regards to the statements coming from the United States in terms of Jake Sullivan and even Antony Blinken, they're talking about a potential of a ceasefire within weeks. Previous reports said Donald Trump asked Netanyahu to finish the war before he comes in. He was even asked, do you trust Netanyahu? He said, I don't trust anyone, but I asked him to finish the war before that. And more statements coming from the US. However, again, the United States has been buying Israel time throughout its genocide, and the only thing that they've been doing is supporting them with weapons, expanding their terror to Lebanon, to Syria, and other countries too. And now they are warning Iran. And this warning came in the form of a speech from Benjamin Netanyahu. Benjamin Netanyahu always tries to address the Iranian people of other nations, saying that, Israel is looking for peace and we love you and we want to have peace with you. They'll do that with the Syrian people, do that with even the people of Gaza, funny enough. And Netanyahu is addressing the Iranians. And usually when Benjamin Netanyahu asks people or addresses people and talks about peace and prosperity, you need to wait for war. You need to wait for a genocide to happen. So he addressed the Iranian people, the citizens of Iran, saying that your regime is afraid of you. A day will come and Iran will be free. Together, we will realize a future of peace much sooner than you think. Okay. Prosperity, the regime is oppressing you. We are, same people. The Iranian government is wasting billions abroad. And, he's talking about tyranny and all of these things, typical propaganda coming from Israel about Iran. However, why is Netanyahu saying all of that about Iran, especially his statement in his speech that he had, by the way, just a couple of hours ago? Especially the phrase, together we will realize the future of peace much sooner than you think. What does Benjamin Netanyahu mean by much sooner than you think? If you observe in the Israeli media, there has been a lot of talk about Iran. People are showing pride in the fact that, Israel is now occupying territories further into Syria. They're gradually withdrawing from Lebanon, but they haven't withdrawn completely. Today they withdrew or started to withdraw from Al-Khiyam following the entry of the Lebanese army. And despite many breaches, Hezbollah are still looking at it in a very important manner to try and preserve the ceasefire. They don't want to be dragged into another round now. And that's a tactical move primarily from Hezbollah, because they want to be the ones who are deciding when to expand this. They tried throughout the Al-Aqsa flood to keep everything at bay. However, when things escalated when it comes to Lebanon, the priority started to become to have a full ceasefire in Lebanon, albeit with pressure still being applied on Israel, especially with the situation with the north and the front altogether continuing. I mean, in Gaza, the Palestinian resistance are still targeting all of the Israeli bases. They target Netzarim today with mortar shells, Al-Qassam brigades and Al-Aqsa Martyrs brigades, and also Yemen. Yemen has been targeting Israel regularly, and Israel is worried about Yemen continuing to target them alongside the embargo that they are imposing on Israel. But the talk in the Israeli media, and hence the speech coming from Benjamin Netanyahu, is we need to reach the head of the snake. This is what they're calling Iran, the head of the octopus or the head of the snake. They're saying Iran started the 7th of October. Iran supports Hezbollah. Iran supports Ansarullah in Yemen, and they channel all of these weapons. And we need to get to the bottom of this, and we need to attack Iran. And the logic behind this, as delusional as it may sound, because Israel received massive blows from Iran in True Promise 1 and True Promise 2, and we're still pending a True Promise 3. That's depending on when Iran would see it suitable to, go ahead with True Promise 3. Iran, well, officially at least, they don't have nuclear weapons. So from Israeli perspective, they don't want Iran to reach a nuclear bomb. Although, again, we've had indications from Iran previously after they were threatened with a nuclear bomb by some, Western countries or even some Arab countries going to Iran threatening them by saying we will respond with a similar manner. And they did not elaborate with what is that similar manner. Is it going to be talking about a nuclear bomb, or are they going to land so much on Israel that they will regret the day they launched an attack on Iran? And it's quite unlikely, despite all of the developments in Syria, that Iran will just completely cancel True Promise 3. However, it's again about reaching the objectives politically beforehand and previously the Iranian president, he said that, how Israel behaves will affect how hard we hit them back. So there's more talk about attacking Iran from Israel, and Benjamin Netanyahu is leading that line. Benjamin Netanyahu is leading that front. He wants to attack Iran, and he knows that the United States is still arming him despite all of the crimes that he is committing. Which leads me to the next point that I wanted to talk to you about. Iran and Turkey, they've always had relationships. They've always had relations, and the trade levels between Iran and Turkey have been very intense, despite differences on Syria, despite differences in the global arena. But now they're taking it to the next level. Now they are signing a trade deal cooperation agreement set to 30 billion. 30 billion, that's a massive increase in the trade between Iran and between Turkey. Trade, transport, customs, transit, investment, banking, electricity, agriculture, culture, tourism, and cooperation. And one thing that it's important to note here, no one is talking about any, military or, intel cooperation here. After the Al-Aqsa flood started, there was a constant room between Iran and Turkey about what's happening. And they meet regularly when it comes to that. And now, with the changes that are happening in Syria, the meetings between Iran and Turkey intensified. And this cooperation with them that is primarily financial, it only indicates the level of ties that are happening between Turkey and Iran, despite the fact that the relationship between the two is portrayed as somewhat, hostile, according to some many people. And that's another indication that they are cooperating again when it comes to Syria. There has been a lot of talk about continued cooperation. And when it comes to Syria now, Iran made more statements. Firstly, the supreme leader of Iran, Sayyid Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, he had a post on X. In his post, he said, the insurgency front or the resistance front will drive the US out of the region and destroy the foundation of Zionism. That's yesterday. He also added 2 hours ago that the young Syrians will liberate the territories occupied by the Zionist entity. The young Syrians will liberate the territories occupied by the Zionist entity. Again, a change in tone when it comes to Iran and everything that has been happening in Syria. In previous years, some of the movements that used to be part of the Syrian opposition or fight in Syria, well, Iran was present in Syria under the excuse of fighting them. And now, especially several days back, about 4 or 5 days ago, just before the collapse of the Assad regime, all of a sudden everything changed when it comes to Iran. And now they are even indicating that they still have a supply. They still have a supply. What's the supply? Well, the main body concerned about the supply for the resistance or supporting the resistance when it comes to Iran is the IRGC Major General Commander-in-Chief Hussein Salami. Hussein Salami, he said actually, well, no, the supply line is still open. Ways to support the resistance fronts are open and not limited to Syria. And he added, when it comes to Syria, things are developing. What does he mean by things are developing? Things are developing, meaning that, well, there's a level of coordination. That coordination is not something that's going to be made public. But clearly, Iran hasn't stopped, even when it comes to Hezbollah in Lebanon, especially when it comes to the routes that they used to provide for Hezbollah. So the report said we were aware of the movements of militias and takfiris in Syria during the past months, and we were able to identify the fronts of the possible attack and inform the relevant military and political officials in Syria about that. But there was no will to change. Some expect the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps to fight the battle instead of the Syrian army, but it's logical for us to fight in another country while the army of that country stands by and watches. Now, that's not the full picture. That sentiment was, again, portrayed by the Russians too. But the way everything is being portrayed in Iran when it comes to Syria is changing with time. And then he added that the power of Iran hasn't declined. Otherwise, we would have not carried out True Promise 1 and True Promise 2. He pointed out the need to change strategies according to the situation, explaining that Iran makes appropriate decisions, acts based on its capabilities and talents, and has strong political logic for fighting. And the paths to support the resistance front, and this does not mean that all paths are limited to Syria. These fronts are open, and even there, the matter may gradually take another form again. So clearly, Iran is continuing. And the other day, we had statements from the Supreme Leader saying that, no, people are wrong. People are saying, the resistance front is weaker. They're wrong. We're actually stronger than ever before. And again, strong messages against the United States and Israel. With Israel, again, trying to raise tensions between Iran and, have all of these threats. How substantiated are they? How, relevant are they, the threats of Benjamin Netanyahu when it comes to Iran? At the end of the day, they are an expansionist, neo-colonialist entity. But when it comes to Iran in particular, well, we saw what their attack did in Iran. It was a massive failure. They had very limited effect. They carried out the strike from Iraqi airspace that is controlled by the United States. And, Iran took down the majority of the missiles or projectiles that Israel launched on Iran. There were 5 people who were soldiers in the Iranian army, not the IRGC, but it wasn't that effective. And then again, based on the previous responses that we saw from Iran, the Iranian effect on Israel is far greater than the effect that Israel can have on Iran. It was a coward attack, full of cowardice, and they did not achieve their objectives. Israel only acts, like it goes ahead and, with this fake bravery of theirs when the other side is unable to respond. So either you're talking about innocent civilians or lack of capacities to confront them. However, Iran proved that they have significant capabilities when it comes to attacks, especially with their strategic missiles, and they have significant capabilities when it comes to the defense, especially with the anti-aircraft that has been used following the Israeli attack, the Zionist attack in Iran. Which leads me to Syria. In Syria, things are developing very fast, and now there are more indications that things might take a positive turn where in the northeastern part. What's in the northeastern part? Well, the northeastern part is the area that is controlled by the SDF, or the Syrian version of the PKK, called YPG in general. Well, Turkey considers them all as one. The problem is, for Syrians, is that the SDF is backed by the United States of America. They're backed by the United States of America. But today they released this post here. Well, they posted it on X. On the occasion of the victory of the will of the Syrians and the overthrow of the oppressive regime, the Democratic People's Council decided to raise the flag of independence on all institutions of the democratic self-administration in the region of the North and East Syria, affirming the unity of Syria and its national identity. Yes, some were celebrating the collapse of Bashar al-Assad, but not to a level where they automatically endorse what's happening now. However, before we reach that stage, and on the map, we're talking about the massive expansion with the transition government backed by Turkey, deep into SDF-controlled territory, Deir ez-Zor, and now there were protests in Al-Raqqa, which is a very important hub at the heart of the northeastern part of Syria. But they're still there. Now, what is the excuse of SDF and what is the excuse of the United States? The excuse of the United States is that we're supporting the SDF so that ISIS cannot pop up again. They are imprisoning thousands of people. And Raqqa was the main hub for ISIS inside of Syria. Although ISIS was a tool that it was being used by many countries across the world, right? Primarily Western intelligence agencies, but also including other countries regionally, including within Syria. Okay, what is the limit? What is the limit? Before the attacks began heavily by the Syrian transition government backed by Turkey, the United States sent a warning and sent one of the top figures in the US Army, Kurilla, to the region to try and intimidate, try and show that, look, we're supporting them here. What did the United States say? They said before this offensive began, they said, do not come close to the areas of SDF and do not carry out operations towards the east of the Euphrates. You can't attack in these areas. We're supporting them here. This is our area. Another problem is, well, the United States controls oil fields. However, even with the oil fields, the United States withdrew from one of their oil fields in Syria following repeated attacks in the past 14 months. And they are looking to continue and control some of these oil fields with the SDF being present there. But the problem is, people are feeling the vibe in that area. People are celebrating in the streets, and you have clashes between the population in the northeast of Syria and the SDF to a level where they force them to retreat in that area. But the fact that there are certain diplomatic moves happening indicate that, well, there could be a process that would not include a lot of bloodshed, similar to what happened with the deterrence of aggression, where, well, simply, in many cases, the Assad army was just fleeing or, handing in their weapons, and just a few battles really here and there, and then Assad ended up fleeing. So could we see the same thing in northeast Syria? Potentially, but so far you're talking about a movement that is feeling like they still have the backing of the US, but they have the pressure of a couple of things. Number one, the momentum of the Syrian people. So they're saying, you created SDF and you have this campaign here because you had, what the claim is, you had an authoritarian or repressive government, for example. Well, now we took it down. What are you going to do? We're trying to unite the country here, and we're trying to have all of the Syrians together. But you also have, it's not just that, you also have power coming from the transition government, both the SNA and HTS, backed by Turkey. And they're feeling that pressure because now the central government of Syria, the transition government, has over 30 to 40% territories in total, if not even 50%, than what the previous Assad government had. That means there's more momentum geographically against them. There's popular demand. There's internal public demand too, because these people are part of Syria at the end of the day. There's, of course, the whole argument about the division and the map and the Sykes-Picot, and that traditionally this area was split in an unfair manner, especially with the population in the historical area of Kurdistan. That's indeed something that the colonizers or ex-colonizers that are still operating wanted to have. Like the traditional Kurdistan area split between Syria, Iran, Iraq, and Turkey. But fact of the matter is, we have a move that is looking towards having a united Syria for everyone to be included in that, and clearly this indication, this statement from the self-governing location in the northeastern part of Syria indicates that there could be something hopeful and not bloody when it comes to uniting that part with the rest of the Syria for the sake of the Syrian people. And the final thing that I wanted to talk to you about, it's linked to this. So the challenges that are being faced now in Syria, by the transition government, are primarily the territories. You have the SDF heavily backed by the US in the Northeast, and you have a Zionist expansionist state in the South, land grabbing, occupying more territories and trying to intimidate people in the South and expel them. Israel's plan is trying to capitalize on certain minorities, in particular the Druze community. You have links between Syria, the occupied Golan Heights, Israel, and Lebanon. They're trying to create a bigger kind of Druze location in the South, and having them basically as cannon fodder inside of Syria, to be a front to protect Israel, because Israel does not protect minorities. Israel uses minorities, and they try and capitalize on everything to do with minorities. That's why the transition government in Syria was trying to reassure as much as possible all of the minorities and depart from all of the problems that Syria faced in the past 14 years, to have them under them. But Israel is still capitalizing on that and is still using the scare campaign, well, alongside many, of course, when it comes to Syria, that no, the new Syrian government, they will, haunt you down, take you down, they will abuse you, etc. Although conflicting images and, not conflicting, the opposite is coming really from Syria on the ground, from people on the ground in Syria. So if they are able to, and that's an important development here when it comes to the self-governing part of the northeastern part of Syria, if they are able to, that's it, include them in new Syrian government, get the recognition, because again, the new government Syria is facing problems globally too. The HTS are still considered a terrorist organization, and the United States and the countries that label it are still trying to use that card as much as possible to extract positions during an era where a new Syria is being born. And they are doing that primarily for the sake of Israel, not for the sake of anyone else. And in Israel, the thought process is, we need a demilitarized, maybe Syria. We could potentially start with a demilitarized South, and then a demilitarized whole state. In effect, sucking everything out of the, sovereignty of Syria. Because at the end of the day, Israel knows that if they unilaterally canceled the 1974 agreement they had with the previous Syrian government, well, they told the world then, that's it. Any understanding that we have with Syria is now gone. What does that mean for the Syrian side too? Well, if you cut this understanding, that means we can cut the understanding from our end, especially when it comes to the Golan Heights, because the whole Golan Heights are occupied. The Golan Heights have been occupied since 1967. And what Israel is doing, by the way, is firstly a show to kind of ruin the Syrian people's joy when it comes to the fall of Assad, right? And then try to intimidate, but primarily, that's the true essence of it, it's panic and fear coming from Israel. It's panic and fear, and in the grand scheme of things, they're shooting themselves in the foot. Why? Because throughout all of the period of the Syrian revolution, Israel used to always say, we support the revolution, we support the rebels. They even supported some of the people in the south in Israel. And they constantly say, yeah, we have to, of course, get rid of Bashar al-Assad and all of that. Okay. Well, many people didn't believe them. Some probably fell for it. But what are they doing now, in effect? In effect, now what they're saying is, well, no, sorry, we weren't really serious. We want to control territories of South Syria. And the United States and some countries, well, primarily the United States, are trying to whitewash what Israel's doing to the highest extent by saying that, oh, well, these measures are temporary. The Israelis told us that, they have worries. And then they released a statement saying that, we want to make sure terror doesn't establish itself in Syria. Terror doesn't establish itself in Syria. You have a war criminal entity next to Syria charged as a genocide entity by the ICJ, right? Well, blamed for committing a genocide blatantly on very limited facts, by the way. If we add in all of the facts, they will be, blamed with far worse things than that. And you have a prime minister and an ex-defense minister who are wanted for war crimes. And the United States itself, who's talking about, well, the administration was talking about not having the potential of like terror establishing itself in Syria. They are the great grandmother of terrorism of modern day history. They established their country on mass ethnic cleansing of the indigenous natives in America. And they have been always supporting genocides and wars across the world and mass terror, and are protecting an entity that has committed the worst genocide and still is in the 21st century. However, still, despite all of that, and many people know that, Syria is in a very vulnerable position. Israel ruined all of the army. You're talking about a need to rebuild. Half of Syria is destroyed. Whole towns and cities are destroyed. And you're talking about healing wounds of 14 years, right? And they want to establish themselves. They want to make sure everything is fine when it comes to security, when it comes to financially and the rebuilding process. And there are a lot of efforts to do with this rebuilding, but the Israeli threat will always be there. Israel is the main cause of problems. And even if or when the transition government reaches an understanding with the northeastern part, SDF controlled territories, which is a priority because we're talking about a third of Syria now, well, just about 25%. That's a significant chunk of land. They would still be facing that threat coming from Israel, and Israel has traditionally showed that, well, they don't really understand the language of diplomacy. Is diplomacy going to work? If diplomacy is going to work, well, the new government is going to have to give in concessions. Are they going to give concessions? And how is that going to be taken by the Syrian public? So many interesting things are going ahead. A relevant key player here, of course, is Turkey. And, well, Erdogan said the next 3 months will change the face of the world and will be detrimental for Turkey as well. So are we going to see things heating up and getting interesting? We will see, depending on how things develop, and we will, of course, keep talking about them. And these were the main things that I wanted to talk to you about in this live stream. And I'll open the space up for you if you have any questions or comments to share some of them with the limited time left that we have in the stream. And by the way, if anyone has any question, if you wouldn't mind highlighting them, and if you sent anything before, if you wouldn't mind sending it again now, just for the amount of messages that we receive. And again, welcome everyone for to another live stream. Texas Gem, thank you. And HS and JD and Glenn Huxley, all of you, thank you so much for your supers, much appreciated. Texas GRN, he said, here in the US, they are blaming Iran for having a drone mothership off the East Coast. Sounds like BS. Well, I'll tell you one thing that the United States has been doing with in relation to Iran, especially Trump himself. I mean, the funny thing is, we know who tried to assassinate Trump. Well, the images were published, right? And there was a massive flaw from the security forces, people who are, trying to protect him. Yet he somehow mentioned Iran. Why are you mentioning Iran? What did Iran do to you? Iran has no interest. The threat to global security and stability is the United States and its proxies across the world. The United States, NATO, and Israel. They are the biggest threat to the world. They are warmongers. They always interfere, and they sponsor and export terrorism, state-sponsored terrorism. They don't have the right to talk about any other country. And when it comes to Iran, they start fabricating stuff. So all of a sudden, we started to hear people coming from the United States, some officials talking about, or even if the FBI, I think it was, some, foreign origin people linked somehow to Iran trying to assassinate Trump. What is that going to achieve for Iran? What is that going to achieve, really? Plus, is everything in the hands of the United States president? Of course not. The United States president is a front. And usually they're a front for who? For the people who employ him or fund him or support him. It's not like they have... of course, you can negotiate or talk about, discuss about differences and what have you. But essentially, they're all the same. And HS said, keep up the good work, brother. We need more voices like yours. Thank you so much, my friend. And JD, your interest and dedication, truth is unmatched. Thank you so much, my friend. Much appreciated. And Glenn Huxley as well. Thank you so much for that. Let's see what else we have. Isi Ahmad, don't you think US will just activate the wanted bounty for the new Syrian leader if he doesn't act for Turkey and NATO? So he will only be able to fight against Hizb Iran, definitely not the Zionist. Well, listen, I think what they're doing now in Syria, everyone knows the history of Ahmad al-Shara al-Julani. Fact of the matter is, well, it's not about talks about certain change. We have seen how the rebels took control over Syria. You have this whole propaganda campaign of butchering and killing and slaughtering and what have you. Relatively, that quickly, with the forces withdrawing and constant reassurances, with people from all communities celebrating. It's not that image that, some are trying to push for. However, a key thing in this change of image is for Syria to become a state. Because, the easiest way to attract war is to go and do the things that, the United States wants you to do. Now, when it comes to if he doesn't act for Turkey, NATO, and will only be able to fight Hizb in Iran, well, firstly, the fight with Hizb in Iran has ended. Hezbollah in Iran are out. From their perspective, their priority was to fight them when they were there, because from the rebel perspective, Iran and Hezbollah were helping the oppressive government. From an Iranian Hezbollah perspective, what they used to say is that, no, we're protecting our interest and we're fighting against terror here, right? And but they have a history with them. So from their perspective, they're out. And as a matter of fact, the HTS leader himself, he said that we don't mind having strategic relationship with Iran so long as they don't have interference in internal matters to do with Syria. And again, well, Iran withdrew from the sacred places they used to protect in fear of massacres happening. You see people still there, still praying, still performing their rituals, and everything is moving on as normal, unlike, this hype and propaganda that's being spread. But actions are louder than words. Time will show. Time will show if this man will do anything, right? Is he in a position now to do anything? He's not in a position to go and wage war against Israel. But the thing with Israel has to be confronted one way or another. The question is, what will they do in the meantime? Israel is trying to take advantage and hit it when it's suitable for Israel. They're trying to have an upper hand. That's why they are occupying more Syrian territories. They know that a state is at its weakest during the initial phase of establishment, abusing the vacuum. And again, with typical Israeli behavior, only having this massive aggression when their enemy is unable to respond. That's why they were cowards with Iran, because they are cowards by nature. The Zionists are cowards by nature. They only fight countries when they are demilitarized, they don't have a chance to respond, or against innocent civilians in hospitals and, orphanages. But again, time will show. And depending on these agreements that are reached, we'll weigh them out with the position from the transition government and talk about it accordingly. And Alan, thank you so much, my friend. So thank you for your insight, speaking the truth from the heart. Thank you so much, my friend, for your continued support. And Tam, you're asking me something interesting. Will Jordan be the back door to get the arms into the resistance? I think you're asking something that is really spot on, because for some reason, well, I'll explain why, but there is a lot of talk in Israel about a massive worry from Jordan. They're worried about what's happening in Syria, very worried, and they are trying to delegitimize and tarnish the image of the new government in Syria. And they are worried about Jordan. Why are they worried about Jordan? Firstly, Jordan has the biggest, longest borders to the eastern part of occupied Palestine. Although Israel is present, by the way, on the line in the West Bank, enabled by the West Bank Authority, there are no clear, walls or what have you between them and Jordan. So in many cases in Jordan, there are soft spots. Benjamin Netanyahu is saying now we need to build a wall alongside all of the borders. Judging by the acts of the Palestinian resistance in the West Bank, despite the fact that they are being fought against by Israel and by the Palestinian Authority led by Abu Mazen in the West Bank. And by the way, the West Bank Authority, do you know what they did? They did not agree to have a joint committee with Gaza to get in aid so that the Rafah border can open. Can you imagine that? So again, these problems are beyond, no one is sacred here, right? From the Palestinian people or the Syrian people or anyone. But they're worried about Jordan, and judging by the levels of actions that are coming from the resistance in the West Bank, they surprised everyone. They're using weapons that are, people didn't think that they had. And the other day, Israel carried out an ambush. They actually caught a shipment that they're claiming is coming from Iran that included heavy weaponry to the West Bank. How are they letting it go in? Is it that sophisticated? What is the network? And does Jordan have a part to play with it? But what Israel did confirm is what we found was only the tip of the iceberg. So again, you need to understand something. Israel will use any excuse, though. They will use or create any excuse. Israel has an expansionist plan, and this expansionist plan will hasten the demise of Israel. It's all a show when it comes to Israel. It's all a show to intimidate other people, to try and say, no, we are the ones who will write the history. We are still in Lebanon. We're still in Gaza. We will take everything in the West Bank and we will expand further in Syria. And guess what? Jordan and Egypt are next. They are trying to instill this defeat in the people, but it's all stemming from their own weakness and paranoia. And the more they try and expand, the more they will get a blow. Because think about it for a second. Okay, they occupied territories 1948, 1967. They were expelled by the resistance in Gaza, but now they occupy Gaza. Are they based in Gaza? Or will they be forced to retreat from Gaza? They will be forced to retreat from Gaza. They're still in Lebanon, right? They're occupying parts of Lebanon after years when Hezbollah and the Lebanese resistance expelled them. But they're occupying Lebanese territories now, right? they will retreat. And they will retreat from the Syrian territories that they occupy, and they will retreat from the Golan Heights up until they retreat from reality. The Zionist genocidal entity is on its way to be doomed. Nothing that it does in terms of intimidation or aggression will, buy it time. This is an illusion, and people need to be aware of that and not push for an expansion of this illusion. Israel is a fake entity, and no matter how much it stretches its borders, it's bound to be doomed. And what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing is hastening the demise of the genocide. And that was from Tam McIntosh. Thank you so much, my friend. And more service 1970, inshallah, Syria will be part of the resistance. I think what Syria has done is resistance, internally, if you ask me. And thank you for that. Because we can't all consider everything based from our perspective on geopolitical matters. Syria has Syrian people. They have their own wills. They have their own demands. They are the ones living under the previous government. And they are entitled to do whatever they want to do, regardless of anyone, by the way. But I think that many people approach Syria with this level of arrogance and moral high ground, as if, we should be able to tell these people what to do. And no, geopolitically, who are we all to tell them what to do? Like, who are we, any of us, to tell the people of Gaza, oh no, don't have a ceasefire, Israel is on its way to... And who are we? The people are the people who are facing problems. They are entitled to solve their problems. It's as simple as that. And so long as there is a popular demand for it by the majority of the people, well, that needs to be respected. And I think, again, Israel is more worried than ever when it comes to Syria. Hence, the movements that are coming when it comes to Syria. There are calls already now to expand and, have a bigger genocide and what have you. And Cookie Dough, thank you so much as well. Let's see what else we have. Take 2 or 3 more questions. Antithesis, have you heard of Alex Krainer's theory that Iran and Russia may have set up a trap for the West in Syria, lure them in, and over the years apply attrition? What do you think? I think that's a fair assessment. And people undermine what Russia is capable of and undermine what Iran is capable of. And Russia, well, look what they've done to the whole West when it comes to Ukraine, right? Look what they've done to the US and NATO. The US destroyed Europe's economy with the foolishness and ignorance of European countries serving the United States hegemony in Russia. What happened? Well, the prices rose in Europe, costs rose, problems when it comes to energy, everything, problems after problems. What happened to Russia? No problem. Ruble, sky high, self-sustained, back routes, right? Back doors for every sanction that the US does. Don't undermine what Russia's doing. And of course, it's not about endorsing like anyone's position here, but this type of analysis could well be something important, especially when it comes to Israel, by the way. Israel is trying to do a couple of things, right? Have this buffer zone, use people, so control territories under the pretext of protecting minorities, divide and rule, typical playbook. I don't know how some people fall for it, of colonizers, and use some of the minority communities in South Syria as cannon fodder and as what? As an answer to their internal problem when it comes to serving and conscription, because they are unable to make up the numbers. So they'll go to some of minorities, they'll try and tell them, oh, look, you're Druze or whatever, we have our Druze community, and look, they're in the army, and it's if they have their army and what have you, and then send them to the front lines and not have any longer need, for example, to apply conscription with the Orthodox community, and therefore solve the problem. Netanyahu can continue to have deals with the Orthodox community without having any pressure legally or politically or public pressure to apply conscription on them. Why? Because I have cannon fodder minorities, new minorities who are willing to fight, and it's their land. So it could absolutely be true. But again, in the fog of war, when things are all mixed up, you just need to focus on everything that's coming. Do you know what I mean? Read it from the ground, not get sucked into the propaganda and all of the, people trying to defend their own positions or, certain approaches when it comes to Syria. It's important to see everything. It's important to see what's happening on the ground live. And then, of course, judge based on that. So that could be a thing. But again, we're talking about a thing that's developing. That is developing, and we really don't know when things might escalate or what have you. For example, the priority of the Syrian people now, outside this global game thing, is to have a free state, free institutions, good economy, lack of corruption, participation in power, right? All of these things that anyone wants for his country, without considering what the external countries want. This is their priority. And I believe everyone has the responsibility to support the Syrian people in their aspirations for liberty, transparency, rule of law, all of the things that anyone wants, really, human rights in any country. But again, you cannot deny that there are interests for many countries inside of Syria, and they will play a part for better or worse, and that will be revealed in the coming period when it comes to Syria. And again, it could be quicker than what anyone is expecting. Del Sendero Mahmoud, some sources show there were a good number of Iranian garrison stations in Syria. Is it true? What happened to them? Any info on that? Iran withdrew from Syria. That's what happened. Iran was present in Syria under the pretext of protecting shrines and supporting the lifeline of the resistance, and not let Syria fall and what have you. They were criticized even at that, and not many people bought their argument or Hezbollah's argument that we are there just to protect a resistant state, right? Some people said, okay, you have a point. Others said, no, you're going against the will of the Syrian people, regardless of what happens or what chaos happens inside of Syria, right? So they were there. Now they withdrew, and again, nothing is happening. Everyone is living peacefully. The shrines, the holy shrines, are fine and protected, and people are there. But when it comes to them withdrawing, well, they saw what's happening. Now, my understanding of the situation is it took Iran by surprise. It took Iran, unless I'm mistaken, unless Iran was part of this anyway. But the Syrian people, or the Syrian armed opposition, they planned to use Iran's engagement with Israel and Hezbollah withdrawing forces from Syria to fight for Israel, where they really should actually be and prioritize, and said this is our moment. When they felt like this is our moment, Iran, Russia, and Turkey came to Al-Assad, told them, listen, things are changing. It's time to finalize the Astana procedure. There was a peaceful process and things were quiet for a while. There were still attacks here and there, but generally quiet. And Al-Assad, no, I don't want to have these people with me in power. We don't want to change the country and what have you. Iran is saying, okay, we monitored movements from these armed groups in Idlib at the time. Again, Assad did not listen. So the campaign happened, right? The deterrence of aggression, or the dawn of freedom, as they called them, two operations. And then Iran was put in the image of what's happening. And most likely they would have had confirmations from Turkey when it comes to the situation, like, we're not going to target your interests or whatever. Likewise with Russia, and their interests haven't been touched. The only thing that we saw today when it comes to Russia is Russian forces mobilizing from Hmeimim to Tartus. Although Russia is heavily criticized inside of Syria for participating with al-Assad. You know, people in Syria blame them for killing people and what have you. But they're moving, and they're not being targeted. So clearly there's an understanding. No one can say that there is no understanding. And that's why Iran withdrew. But none of the Iranian forces or Hezbollah who were stationed inside of Syria participated with anything after they saw what was happening, and that the Syrian army is actually handing themselves, because the opposition told them, if you don't fight, you're protected. That's it. Just go home. And many of them did. That's it. And the only people that they are targeting now are people who are responsible for massacres, like Tadamun massacre, what have you, close people who are very close to Bashar al-Assad, who are verified to authorize certain massacres inside of Syria. But that's why, well, the Russians left and the Iranians left, because from their perspective, Assad fled eventually. Syrian army didn't fight. Why should I go and die for you? And clearly, there were some talks between them and Turkey and Russia. And the rebels too. That's why the tone shifted. All of a sudden, they are armed opposition, not terrorists, and all of that stuff. And when that changes from Iran, that means, well, there's an understanding. And by the way, some people say that, oh, Iran was forced to. That's not convincing. Iran had the power to do something, right? Iran wasn't like unable to do anything when it comes to Syria if it was that important. Right? But clearly there were mutual interests. They were met. Criticize them. Don't criticize them. They were wrong from the get-go. No wrong from the get-go. Another debate. You know what I mean? But they weren't there when al-Assad was fleeing. And I hope that clarifies. And take the last one from Christopher Kelly before we wrap up. He said, I saw an ex-USA serviceman saying Oreshnik was a huge psyop. The lack of imagery in the USA bravado lends credits to this. I don't think it was a psyop. I think the Oreshnik is real. We saw the impact of it, and we saw how it landed. Now, mind you, it creates something massive in the sky that would appear bigger than, of course, what it is. And, you know, when it lands, it landed according to what it is described to do, right? And it's part of the Russian strategic weapons that were published in 2018. In 2018, Russia published a list of new weapons that included the Oreshnik and the Kinjal and other gliding missiles that they said no one has an answer to, including Russia. So no, anti-aircraft, no F-35, nothing can take them down. And we saw that happening. Clear, because they're so fast that they create this ring of fire around them, expel anything that can come against them. And I think there is a tendency to underplay, and undermine what Russia is capable of. Although Russia, in my opinion, has been acting in a more reasonable manner than the United States in terms of global conflicts. Like Western mainstream media is full of propaganda about Russia and about China too. Again, not an endorsement, please. But listen to Putin in his interviews, not like a hostile, childish, with this griftish approach that, some of the Western or most of the Western leaders have. But no, they have strategic weapons. And no matter how much they try and downplay it in the US, it's not going to work. At the end of the day, it looks like things started to tone down slightly when it comes to Russia. I mean, Zelensky himself is saying that's it. We're willing to recognize parts of the territories in East Ukraine as Russian, according to him, in return for NATO membership. He wants to expand this terror organization, the NATO. But Trump, on the other hand, he said day one war ends, and he also said proposed a delay. So the middle ground that Trump would try and do between him and Putin, between Zelensky and Putin, is, okay, recognize Russia, although, by the way, Trump himself said there is no such a thing as Ukraine, by the way. But he will try and reach a deal or make a deal between Russia and Ukraine, where territories that belong to Ukraine or used to belong to Ukraine post the Soviet Union collapse will go to Russia, like Crimea did, in return for a delay in any potential Ukrainian NATO membership for 20 years. Putin would want a reassurance that they will never join the NATO. I don't think that's something that US and NATO are going to give him. I think the best thing is going to give him is, like, a couple of decades of delay. And then they would be able to wrap it up there. But no, undermining what Russia has in terms of capacity, that's not going to work. And we'll wrap it up there, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in for another live stream. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. Of course, apologies if we did not find or reach all of the comments. Thank you, everyone who sent supers. Much appreciated. Josie Buzz, Aini Anwar, More Services 1970, Cookie Dough, Alan Marwin, Was 81, Francis Fitzgerald, Khalid Razak, Glenn Oxley, JD, HS, or Shark Love, and Texas GRN. Thank you all. I'll hopefully have a video with you. The typical thing we usually do, really, either a segment or a video for you. And we'll hopefully be here tomorrow, either with a live stream or video, or a video or two. In the meantime, I hope I shed some light as to what's happening and added some beneficial information for you. Stay blessed, everyone. Take care. Thank you again for tuning in, and I will see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone.